Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Legal Document Management Technology as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series. Our speaker today is Tomas Zuros. Tomas Zuros is a lawyer and technology advocate working at the intersection of law, IT, and client consulting. With AbacusNext since 2004, he currently serves as Chief Solutions Architect, guiding firms through the process of identifying forward-facing technology options and ensuring the successful implementation of a tailored solution. With a focus on practice automation and cybersecurity, Zuros is dedicated to helping firms leverage technology to streamline their practices and protect their intellectual capital so they may remain focused on delivering the best possible outcomes for their clients. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Fantastic. Thanks for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Tomas Zuros, and today I am going to dive into legal document management technology, specifically automation, and some of the ways that you can get a return from or leverage technologies available to both increase productivity, increase profitability, and also mitigate the risk so that compliance and some of the other things that are necessary for you to handle as part of your practice and managing all the information that you retain and that you have from your clients, you're leveraging technology to help you with that. And specifically automation, when used to create or manage documents, is a buzzword in the legal tech space, and it has been for the past few years. It's viewed as, in some ways, a threat to kind of the firm status quo, as well as, or conversely, as a panacea, right? The answer to all that ails firms in achieving productivity, profitability, growth, all of the different kind of goals that are shared. Well, as most things, the extremes are provocative and perhaps help frame the conversation. But today I'm going to focus on real-world benefits of document automation and how artificial intelligence, AI, is helpful in helping you manage your documents and make sure that you're staying in compliance with all the regulations that apply to you as an individual or as a group, an entity that stores sensitive, protected information. I'll also identify the current limits of automation, document automation and management, and what we're seeing likely to happen next. And my goal is to share information that I've gained in working with many firms over the years and help clear up confusion around this specific topic. I'll also touch on how you can protect your documents from outside threats, cyber attacks, ransomware, even accidental exposure, in order to mitigate the risk and apply best practices in using the technology protections that are available to you today. And then, as Sasha mentioned, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so make sure that you enter your questions as we go, and I'll address as many of those as we have time when we get there. So we have a little time, so let's jump in. So how you may benefit from legal technology and using automation is the question of the hour, right? And the first, the next kind of logical step is why. Why would you use document automation? So right out of the gate, the first aspect, or first benefit, I should say, is from a risk management perspective, and in order to ensure compliance, the ability to create document templates. Those templates have your, intellectual property, they have your best practices, they have your understanding of how a document, whether it's a straightforward letter, whether it's an engagement agreement, a contract, any type of agreement that you may need to create. Automation ensures that the document that you want to create on the output side of things is automated so that the process of capturing information, how that information is displayed, in what format, in what order, what is or isn't, or shouldn't be part of the document, all of that can be built into your templates so that the automation aspect becomes a fluid way of ensuring that the true output that we want is ensured by a process that gets us there. And the process is something that you have a lot of control over. All right, so that's the first step. Second step is simply standardization. Too often I work with firms where, one individual has this version of a document, another individual has a slightly older or slightly newer, but any of those variables, right, any of those variations, those inconsistencies can lead to problems, either inaccurate, information kind of propagating itself through multiple copies of the same document, or a typo here, or, a formatting error there. The goal of automation is not only to ensure that the accurate content of your output documents is something that the process helps you with, but how that document appears, so that is consistent whether I create it, whether my assistant creates it, whether an associate or the managing partner. Our goal as a firm is to understand this is, the output document that we need in the exact right format, and every element of that output is something that we can manage because the template itself is something that we all have access to, and using that template to get to the output result is something that we can standardize. So that's another clear advantage of document automation. And finally, efficiency, right? Knowing that, the process for creating a document and the output is something that we all understand, and we know how to do it, and be able to train somebody in using a process where even while we're capturing information, we're using a process where contextual information, the why behind, the question we're asking, and to ensure that we're capturing the right information, all of that is something that can be built into an automated process, with the end result being a consistent, accurate, compliant, and meaningful document, same time every time. Right, so those are the clear advantages that we've seen. So now let's take a look at a kind of a standard usage scenario. Why would we, or how would we use document automation in order to help us create consistent documents that are accurate, and efficient? So the first step is a system where the content author, and that's simply the individual who has subject matter expertise or is kind of a project manager or knows the process that we want or that we regularly perform. That author can then take any single document or group of documents, whether they're a few pages here or 100 pages there, and maybe a kind of a franchise agreement or something that that's elaborate, or an estate plan, right? So as you capture information about this client, understanding, do they have children? Do they have any special needs? What is the nature of their estate? Is it where are the assets, and how are they kind of owned and managed? The idea is your templates are very dynamic. So any single document or multiple documents of whatever complexity you may want to start with, you can design those into templates. Now, we're all pretty familiar with the document template in the mail merge scenario, where your name goes here, the date goes there, and maybe a signature block, or the recipient's address. Like, those kind of things are pretty straightforward. That's something where that is certainly document automation, but it's not really what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the ability to take a template and have kind of dynamic logic built into it, so that if our goal is to create an output document, understanding that there are flexible scenarios where, based on either the nature of the parties, the nature of the what is that, the controversy, or even what the client is needing or requesting, we can create dynamic templates where paragraphs either are applied or not, maybe choice of law, or timeliness, right? If time is of the essence, there are a number of different things that really affect content of the document itself. Not to mention kind of addendum pages, or the understanding that a document template, if it's flexible and dynamic, can adjust greatly. Where maybe I'm working with one client, I'm going through the same process where I'm capturing information. When I go to then create the output document, the template knows what to kind of include or what to omit from that end result, and that can vary greatly, either depending on my practice or just the need or the use of a specific template. So the nice thing about oftentimes with document automation is the content author, which is usually a smaller group within your organization, who has the knowledge to understand, here's the kind of raw material, here are the documents that we've used in the past, here's the process that we want a program or technology to help us kind of manage, and then here are the output scenarios so that the resulting document is accurate, same way every time. Then we kind of shift over to the actual user. Now, the idea of a user of a system like this is starting to expand. So it used to be within the firm, either one person or a small team who's responsible for crafting these documents would be the user in that scenario. But what we found is now, with a lot of these systems, some of the data capture, some of the kind of collection of the important information that then enters into a template and is included in the output document as the end result. The user can also be your client in some scenarios, where somebody with firsthand information can go to, let's say, a web page. It's secure, it's protected. They're then able to review information maybe that you've collected to date, to add additional information that they're privy to. The goal being that interview process is one of the terms we use, whether it's on your smartphone, a tablet, your desktop, or a laptop. The idea is a user, using that flexible description of the user, is able to walk through a guided Q&A where the actual capture of information and how it's captured, and even kind of dynamically in the interview, are there drop-down lists for some consistency? Can we pull from other databases, whether it's a contacts database or a court list of courts or whatever other information you may want to pull into that interview. The whole goal is the interview is simply walking through a form, in essence, an interactive form that captures information, asks you specific questions, and guides you to the completion of the form, and then the dynamic creation of a document, multiple documents, documents in different languages. There's a lot of flexibility there from document automation, specifically where the content author has a toolkit to actually create those dynamic templates. Those dynamic templates are then completed at the end of an interview process. The interview process is also a guided Q&A. So the goal is ease of use, consistency, accuracy, and efficiency, where there's a known productive and positive result in that we have a process that's as efficient as possible, getting us to the output documents that we know that we want to create, and we have a system that helps us with that. And then the final step of that really is any of the information we've captured certainly could populate one or multiple documents. Clearly, that's the small scenario here, but also any information that's captured can then become part of that client's record in our overall, case management system or practice management system. So the idea is this is a component of your overall solution. Certainly it's automation in the production of accurate documents, but also any information captured along the way can also become something that we store and have access to for later use, whether it's just to identify and know this case and where it stands currently. Certainly we can capture and store those documents themselves, but actually any information that we have captured during the process also becomes part of our files going forward, right? So there are a number of different efficiencies. You're checking the boxes there. The goal is automation both at a production level and then at a daily user level, whether users are you, your staff, or your clients. The goal is to find those efficiencies and, of course, maintain security. And I'll touch on that more in some detail in a few minutes. Okay, so now I'm going to move into some of the artificial intelligence or the AI-based document management advantages. Now, this is kind of cutting edge, but these are some of the things that we have actually implemented in our software, and I'll give you some examples. So some of the ways that we're using AI is, if you've created a document using that, document production, the automation scenario that I just described, that document is then ingested or added to your case management system, whether it's at the client level or at the case level. When I take a document and I add that to the system, so it becomes part of this case file, something that I can always access, but something that I can share with the team as we collaborate. What we are using is AI to say, okay, here's a document that's being added to the system. The AI can scan that document very quickly. As it's doing that, it's creating a summary of that document, and it's identifying topics, keywords, and content within the document. So the AI actually categorizes it in seconds. Now, these accurate and consistent tags can then be used, one, to help the system automatically organize this document. This is a document of type X. It needs to be in this folder and so on. So at a firm level, we can also identify what those tags should be, how the AI should, kind of do its pattern analysis or its quick scan and categorization. But the goal is, once those tags have been applied accurately to any document or even 1,000 documents that we add at once, those tags are then something that we can use to organize the document, certainly, but also filter out any documents that aren't part of a current search or need, or identify content that we then want to pull into a report or a group, or just simply facilitate access to those documents. Now, the other benefit of having AI do at least the preliminary kind of categorization, summarization, and organization of these documents is that information is then also something that we can have other kind of protocols utilize. So for instance, if we're doing a search, being able to start with tags or filter out tags is a good way to ensure that that search is a quick way to find what you're looking for. Another kind of wrinkle on that, another advantage is the idea of tags giving you the ability to say, okay, if a document has PII, if it has personally identifiable information, or PHI, kind of medical information or financial information, those tags can also apply a flag for a document of that type. So maybe the document is then restricted, or access to the document is restricted based on that flag. So the idea of using AI to help you manage your documents is to quickly categorize and organize them, and then be able to use any of the information that is then kind of pulled from the document at a high level to include, exclude, or protect the content of the documents that the AI has helped you organize. And in some of our software tools, this process happens at the same point that you take a document you've created or a document that you've received from any source. Once you attach it to the case file, this process happens, and then that document has all that important kind of contextual information stored as metadata. That's very helpful for you in managing it with probably a little less effort and a little less decision making, and a little less manual kind of identification of this document, what it means, who should have access to it. A lot of times that could be automated. The next step is also, additional raw data isn't always necessarily better, but some of the new legal tech tools that are available today give meaningful access to the content of a great deal of documents. So if let's say we received through discovery thousands and thousands of documents of whatever type, or the client, shares with us a great deal of information. Using the AI kind of analysis, right, the original scan and kind of organization of the documents gives us also, via legal technology, the ability to view that information in meaningful ways. So there's novel data visualizations from those AI summaries that can lead to insights because, so I put up a couple here on screen, like a word cloud is a good way to understand kind of what kind of a heat map, right? What language, what terms, what is in this large, group of documents that I quickly scanned, what are some of the key, drivers or content, specifically language that would be helpful for me to get a gist, like an overall understanding of what this contains. And then even more specifically here on the right is the idea of, if there are keywords, being able to know when those keywords are identified or collected, when they kind of connect in a certain way. The goal being that if my job is to analyze a great deal of information contained in documents, these tools are not only a good way to quickly scan and find common elements, but then have, kind of novel data visualizations that help me understand kind of some of the connectors that are in potentially multiple documents that would take me some time to kind of work my way through in order to then identify, using my own kind of skills and experience, those connectors. Instead, oftentimes this automation can help guide you to those connections in a much, more efficient way. And then at that point, you apply your legal expertise, your judgment, your awareness, and all those good things that really make your, your contribution valuable. But the goal of the AI and the document management that we've discussed so far is that, these tools ideally put you farther down the road towards having, the connectors identified. And then from those connectors, your experience and your gut instincts and all those good things that you bring to the table are kind of aided or assisted by having quick access to groups of information, connectors, those kind of things that AI can help you identify. So let's talk about some document workflow automation, because this is another kind of productivity or efficiency gain that we're seeing a lot of firms take advantage of. So law firms can enhance their legal services by automating manual processes, right, using AI and machine learning. Oftentimes it reduces expense based on just time savings, execution timelines, who needs to, review certain items, and having kind of a system that helps track and notify and remind and all those good things. And it can also increase productivity, because if I have a workflow automation system, what I need to do on a daily basis is something that it can help me, stay on task with. But each of the tasks that I perform also oftentimes either involve, a colleague, or as soon as I'm done, well then kind of, the baton moves to the next person. These types of document workflow automation tools can also help you very much as a firm keep processes moving forward without the kind of unknown or kind of tacit delays that happen, where maybe I'm waiting for somebody's response or they're waiting for mine, or sometimes there are inefficiencies that are built into systems where we rely on each other to kind of notify or, move things forward or adjust or even kind of flag the status. Instead, a lot of these systems can do that for you automatically. And one of the statistics that we stand behind is the idea of 23% of a lawyer's manual repetitive processes can be saved with automation. So I talked earlier about kind of one of the threats, or the idea that automation will make us redundant or unnecessary. But what we're really talking about automation here is not your skill set. It's instead the time you have to spend in order to collect information. And then, once the information is organized and available to you, then you apply, your skill set. What these automation tools are ideally designed to help you with is to avoid the time drain for administrative, manual, repetitive processes. right? So the idea is the clear advantage is that you can assist clients because creating accurate documents, capturing information via, an efficient process, and automation in essence can help you with that process. And also integrating with Word and Outlook means that, the tools that you're currently using to collect and communicate, those same tools have these automation aspects built into them. And the final thing I'd like to touch on is the idea that malpractice insurance carriers often offer policy discounts for firms that use this type of automation, where if we're creating contracts or we're needing to review them or there are deadlines and termination dates, systems that help us be aware of where things stand, both as a single, kind of case or client need, and then broadened across multiple cases that are all moving forward at the same time. Document workflow automation is a fantastic way as a firm to be efficient and to gain some advantages from automation. And here's another example, or a clear example of a workflow advantage. So here's an example of a tool in one of our software. So in essence, you can create a process. Like, the appointment is on day 1. In 5 days, there's a reminder that goes out to me and my colleague, and on and on and on. You can imagine that, the advantages of having these types of systems, so that if there's a process that we perform consistently, we can standardize that process so that when I go to apply it to a calendar, either mine or to multiple individuals' calendars, depending on all the kind of contingent or variable events, we can standardize it so that when I go to schedule it, or when anyone else in the firm goes to schedule it, they know how to do it in an efficient and an automated way. And I want to show you the next one. Here's an example that there's some of the design tools. So if I'm in there and I'm kind of saying, okay, so there's an appointment on day 1, and we create the document on day 5, and on day 3 is when we have kind of an interview or questionnaire, so we collect the information. You can build that process step by step. And then if I add a step, it can be a task. That task can then be to generate a document. So in an ideal scenario, we have a multi-step process with multiple dependencies and individuals in the firm who are responsible for their own, part of the process. But we can standardize to a large extent. So ideally, on the right day, on the right time, I receive a reminder or a task notification. But the task notification is already connected to the document that I will produce at the end of, my work today. So instead of clicking, OK, and then going and finding the document and then starting the process, the actual reminder has a button that I click that then initiates the, the document automation process. So the idea is my productivity it benefits from having a process where right day at right time in the right workflow, I receive a notification that quickly connects me to the process where I can create the output document in as efficient a manner as possible. So I just want to touch on that as a concept of building document automation into workflows where, a simple process or maybe a complex process or multiple dependencies, these same types of workflow tools or workflow engines can help us as a firm be as efficient as possible. And then the other thing I'll touch on is the idea of integration, where if we start there in the background with this kind of step-by-step process workflow management tool, it then synchronizes into my Outlook calendar, right? So I'm very aware, I'm used to using Outlook. It's available on my phone as well. Any updates, any changes, any new applications of that workflow are easy for me to digest, easy for me to access, and transparent to an event that I added to my calendar. So the idea is it's not technology that gets in my way. Instead, it connects directly to my Outlook calendar and potentially in my case management system, the case and the client record itself. The goal being that accurate scheduling of multiple dependent steps, and then kind of delivering those notifications to the appropriate individual via the calendar or the tool that they're most familiar with. That's where the seamless sharing, right, with your other business tools mitigates the complexity of using these kind of automation tools, and it also improves usability because I'm already familiar with the calendaring system that I'll use most often. Right. And also this goes to firm adoption and staff buy-in, where, if it fits into my standard operating process, right, my SOP, new technology feels intuitive. It doesn't feel disruptive or complex because it simply adds the steps that I'm already doing in a more automated way. So the integration, I think, is a key example, and that goes back to kind of the workflow tool, and then it goes back to the workflow when you're using it to help generate, review, approve, and create those output documents using document automation. And then the final thing I want to touch on is the idea of collaborating. So one of the problems that comes up a lot is there is kind of a common practice of sharing documents via email or receiving documents that you requested from your client or from other parties. So what I really recommend going forward is using instead we call it a case portal or a client portal. But in essence, it's a secure online space where the individuals that you grant access to that space have access to documents that you've created, appointments in the calendar, all the other information that you've collected as part of the services that you're providing to that client. But in essence, you then have a collaborative space so that 24/7, your client can log in, can upload documents in a secure way, much more secure than via email, because it's too often, this is something I hear a lot. If I'm sending an email to John Smith, I could start to type John Smith, and Outlook tries to help me with some automation saying, do you mean Joan Smith? So I don't review that address as accurately as I should have in one instance versus another. I end up sending a document to the wrong person, or to a group of individuals, or one wrong individual in a group of clients and other parties who should receive it. Those kind of things happen far too often. The idea of an online portal is a very good way to secure information because it's always encrypted with military grade AES 256-bit encryption. Also, you have granular access within your case management system to share exactly the information that you want to share as part of that portal. So it's an easy way for you to collect a great deal of information, but only share pertinent, or a subset of all the data that is necessary. And then the ability to determine how the portal works is built into your system, and also who has access to it is something that you can grant or rescind anytime you need to. So it's something that the idea of all these documents that we're creating, one of the automation aspects of it is the idea of sharing those documents in an encrypted, secure space. That's far better than old school, Dropbox, or, well, I shouldn't say Dropbox, or old school kind of document sharing online, or any of those other tools that don't give you as comprehensive as a method of sharing case information specific to a client. So that's something also that I would recommend strongly in the automation side of things, is the idea of having a space where documents are either are exchanged or sent or received, but you use that portal specific to a client's needs and specific to sharing and receiving the content and important information. And the other thing that's very important about those case or client portals is those can also be used to share the template with your client. So if I have a client, let's say it's a estate planning scenario or family law, I have them log into their secure, portal. They have access to this case, its status, anytime they want to check. They also have the ability to log in and then complete an interview, right? A questionnaire that I ask them to complete, understanding that that information then is available for me to automatically insert into any document that it pertains to, or update their case file in our system. So document collaboration specific on these secure portals is a great way for you to enhance your client services by giving that collaborative space to the client and having them be able to access it anytime they need to in order to look up information or share pertinent information with you. Okay, so the final thing I'll touch on, I'll be very quick here, the idea is compliance, protecting your documents. Ransomware is increasing, not necessarily in the amount of infections, but certainly the kind of impact of those infections. So ransomware is malware, it's malicious software. It's programmed to encrypt data, right? All of your documents, and block access to that information until you've paid a ransom, right? So it's ransomware, it's extortion. It'll cost businesses, I think $11.5 billion in ransoms paid in this year. That's the projection, but it'll also cost businesses more than 75 billion. That's kind of a global statistic, but the idea is the breach or the exposure of your data is one element of the attack, but how you recover, how you restore, how you get back on your feet, that's the real cost there. Some other things are the ABA came up with a stat recently that 25% of all law firms have experienced at least one data breach. Now, data breach could be that email that you sent to the wrong individual. It could be a hack, in the traditional sense where data is exposed, or it could be ransomware, where you're simply locked out from accessing your information. It's not necessarily that somebody else has the data itself, but you don't have it either because of that ransom. Another thing that the stat that's kind of alarming is 50% of IT leads specific to law firms did not believe their organization is prepared to repel a ransomware attack. And I think that repel word is important there because the best practice now is it's not a when, it's an if, or it's not an if, it's a when. So when it happens, how do you recover? Do you have an incident response plan? Do you have like a last good state to restore to? Those are the kind of questions that I often ask when I'm working with clients who are thinking about how best to protect themselves. Here's some best practices very quickly. Training within the firm on consistent security practices, what to do, certainly what not to do. Do not click on links in email. Do not install unauthorized software, and then as a firm, you should be able to prevent that within your network. Deploy endpoint antivirus. The advantage of endpoint is everyone's system is updated from a central location rather than each workstation needing to update on its own. I think that's a huge advantage. Having multiple redundant verified backups. Make sure that you verified it at least quarterly. The virtualization of workstations and servers gives you the ability to reset to the last good state. I think that's a key way of protecting yourself. It's proactive in the ability to say, okay, if we can't predict, we can't understand exactly where each attack or what the next sophisticated attack may be, the ability for us to virtualize our environment means that we can reset one computer or the server or the entire environment if we're ever affected by an attack like this. And also, I certainly am a proponent of secure private cloud infrastructure. The goal, of course, is to remove any single point of failure. Don't rely on one machine or one copy of your entire environment. Make sure that there are redundant, geographically dispersed, cloud-based backups. That's your best practice currently. And then very quickly, some risk mitigation strategies. Separate IT break-fix support, like is a machine working, from data security. Those are really two different kind of compliance protections. Of course, encrypt all of your documents and your email messages. I would use, as I touched on earlier, endpoint antivirus and malware that's very easy to deploy within any network. That's something that if you don't have it, that should be your number one kind of call to action here. I would also recommend that you have a data security or an IT expert perform a security audit. It's a very straightforward, pretty low cost way to ensure you know exactly where you stand currently. It can identify some of the weak points in your network and provide options as far as how to improve your security now, short term, and then of course looking down the road, what are some ways to future proof so that you're not needing to kind of go through that same process in a year or every time that that there's a new type of attack. As I mentioned earlier, adopt and test consistent security protocols. Have a response plan in place. Sometimes that security audit can help you create that incident response plan. And also, as I said, virtualize your network infrastructure, whether it's on site with a remote backup or multiple remote backups or moving to the cloud. More and more firms are taking advantage of the benefits that cloud kind of compliance and security protections and remote access, all the different advantages, understanding that all the automation tools that we talked about today function just as well in the cloud as they do on your local environment. It gives you some flexibility and some options there. So I touched on, the deep learning of these new tools are a great way to ensure that behavior monitoring is the way that your system protects itself rather than kind of a reactive or a preventative measure, which is really outdated at this point. So, I strongly recommend endpoint malware protection and ensure behavioral monitoring is part of the protection because that's the way where you're looking forward for activities in order to kind of stop or prevent attacks as early as possible rather than being reactive, right? So that's one thing I would strongly recommend. Okay, so I've gone over a few minutes, but some of the next protections, content-based AI document template creation is something that we're working on. We're seeing as a next available both protection and automation tool. That's the concept of that author, within the document automation scenario being at least in part AI, where your templates can actually be created or designed to a large extent by AI. Activity-based workflow automation is a nice way to ensure that how we manage our contracts or how we get documents signed, all the different steps and approvals and whatnot, we're seeing a lot of kind of advantages or movement towards workflow automation on that end. The client communication and collaboration portal, that's something that I would look in strongly. I would recommend for any law firm that directly interacts with their clients on a regular basis. And also proactive system protections, as I mentioned earlier. Being proactive in having a system, a good last good state that you can reset to, and certainly having kind of the behavioral monitoring mean that we don't need to identify what the next kind of attack will be. How it kind of starts to affect our system is something that triggers the catch, the protection, and the shutdown of any infection that might get past your initial your initial security. So with that, I'll wrap it up for this session.
Okay, that is all the time that we have for today. Okay. I'd like to thank our sponsor, AbacusNext, and all of you for attending our webinar today as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series. I'd also like to thank Tomas for presenting today. We will now conclude the webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.